January 26th, this arrived. So this is a video about this. Does the world really need another video about the new M1 MacBook Pros? Well, I'm not sure, but I'm making one anyway, so here we go. So why another video about the M1 MacBook Pro, especially a few months after it's been out? Here's why. In my research and watching lots of videos and deciding to finally upgrade to this computer, I never came across one that directly addressed all the little bits and pieces that I encounter from a person who uses it on a daily basis in a specific way. Most of the reviews you'll see online are from tech folks who use it, but they use it in a different way, or they maybe use it for the review and then don't live with it. So this is from I've lived with it a week perspective, so this is a first impression. I'll have some time codes down below where you can jump to different parts of this video that might be of most interest to you. So let's get started. Let's get started with the why question. Why did I upgrade this to this computer? So a big part of answering that question is knowing what I had before, and this is what I had before. The 16-inch i9 MacBook Pro from 2019, and my story with this computer is I ordered it the day it was announced, which is kind of rare for me. I usually do a little research, do whatever, but this seemed like, oh my gosh, it's going to answer all my questions, solve all my problems, address all my needs, and be the computer for the future. This computer, the 16-inch, replaced a computer, a 15-inch MacBook Pro that I'd had for, I believe, 5 or 6 years prior, a 2015 model, or at least 15, maybe it was even 14. I gotta check that out. Look down below here for the correct date of that older computer. So I'd kept that previous computer a long time, and this was an easy decision at the time. It was bigger, better, faster, all the things you want in a computer. And then 2020. 2020 happened, and the world changed. For me, both professionally, personally, and artistically, here's what changed. In 2020, with COVID and the lockdowns and the restrictions, my life changed to become quite a bit more video centric. All my classes that I teach at Highline College went online, so I had to create content for them, spending a lot more time recording video. All those video demands are a lot more than my photo demands had been, so I'm finding out quickly this older i9 is not as sprightly 6 months down the road as it was the day I opened it up. I was putting more demands on it. The thermal envelope of this thin but lovely chassis was becoming a bigger issue as the fans were always kicking on. The computer's running hot, slowing down a little bit as it's running hotter. So those were all factors in my decision to say it's time for an upgrade. And then the kind of final straw that broke the upgrade dam for me was when I started using a program called Ecamm Live for recording these videos, because it lets me do cool things with overlays and 2 cameras. That saves me a ton of time in editing, but it's a really processor intensive app. So again, fans are kicking on while I'm recording. They show up in the recording. I do noise reduction, all this stuff. That's just really pushing this computer, because both of the, I think the case design and the chip architecture to its limits. So knowing this was going to be a big investment, I watched a ton of reviews, went back and forth, which one to get, and here's what I decided on. So I went with the M1 Max, 10-core CPU, 24-core GPU, 32 gigs of unified memory. It's a lot of money. There's the price. Look at the delivery date. This, by the way, this video is being recorded on February 5. So this, if I ordered this computer right now, I would not receive it until April 1 to April 14th. There's a 2-week window. When I ordered mine in December 18th with a scheduled delivery date of February 4 to 11. Mine arrived on about 9 days early on January 26th. So that was a nice surprise getting it about 9 days early, but my goodness, that's a long time. So hopefully this video will help you decide whether this computer might be worth the wait. I will give you a little spoiler alert. For me, it was worth the wait. So why did I do this upgrade? Why now? As I mentioned, I'm putting more and more demands on my computer, and I imagine those demands are only going to get more and more in the future as we deal with larger photo files, larger video files, and the software is written to put more demands on the computer with more capabilities. So that's reason number one I wanted to upgrade, kind of future-proofing. This new memory architecture, the new chip design, gives bigger pipes, faster pipes for the data to go from point A to point B. Just everything is smoother. So the performance is a big issue. Another issue for me is friction. And friction is not something that stops you from doing things, but it's things that put little speed bumps in your way. So for me, some of the friction of the i9 16-inch was the fan noise. It's not a huge deal. They're not real loud, but it's present. It's just a white noise in the background that after a while gets irritating to me anyway. Secondly, the performance just wasn't there, especially doing Ecamm recording, split screen with Lightroom running, trying to do a screen recording of Lightroom, which is a huge processor hog. So it just wasn't as smooth as I wanted. So it put a little friction in the way of doing things. Physically, that computer is much larger and it's heavier. So while the screen is great when you're just sitting somewhere, when it's portable, it's not so great because it takes up a ton of space. It's not as lap friendly, it's not as bag friendly, and it's heavier. So all those little things add up to, yep, this 14-inch for me is kind of the Goldilocks, nice, good compromise, still a great screen, nice size, and lower weight, and all the good things of the M1 Pro chip are in play here. So yeah, the friction is gone. So it's just a great joy to sit down and sit at the computer. Ecamm's running right now recording this. The fans aren't on, and it's just nicer. One of the things that gets in the way of doing a computer upgrade is the process of getting all your data from one computer to another. And Apple's made that super easy with their migration assistant. I've used that before when I migrated from the 15 to the 16. That went really smoothly, and I anticipated it would as well with this computer, and indeed it did. When doing the migration, here's a pro tip for you. Both the 16-inch and the new 14-inch have 1 terabyte SSDs, which I use about half of it, about 500 megabytes. So I was, when you start it up and you're not connected with any cables, you're just going to transfer data by Wi-Fi, which was going to take about 10 hours for 50 megabytes. And I'm like, I don't have that time. So I thought, what happens if I plug in a USB cable? I grabbed the first one I had, which was one of the white Apple charging ones, which didn't seem to speed anything up. And then I thought, let's grab a data one. I have these super speed ones. I think I'm not sure where I got it, to be honest, but they're designed for data transfer. As soon as I plugged it in, both computers recognized it, and the connection switched to this much faster interface, and the migration was done within a half hour. So that was cool, the extra speed. So get yourself a good data cable, USB-C, Thunderbolt 4, whatever they're called. I thought this was supposed to be universal, but there's 30 different versions of these cables. Anyway, so the migration process was pretty seamless. Here was my experience of some things that did not migrate. First, I had to re-enter email passwords. Second, none of the Bluetooth pairings transferred. That kind of surprised me. The other thing that didn't transfer was the Adobe Creative Cloud, the Cloud app, the master app, if you will, control panel app, whatever you want to call it. I had to reinstall that. But all my passwords and other things, as far as I know, transferred over seamlessly. I've been using the computer for, 9 days now, basically a week. I really started using it Friday after I got it. Anyway, so I've been using the computer for about a week now, and all the stuff that was migrated seems to be working well, all the apps, everything. So another issue that I encountered in the migration was not really a migration issue, but a change to this chip architecture. I use a RAID drive by OWC for my storage of video and photo files, and it is software controlled RAID. And I needed to do a little configuration for the M1 chip, which does things a little differently. But the help stuff online was really easy. Took about 10-15 minutes and a reboot, and all was good. So the RAID software is now working again. So once I fired the computer up, hooked it up, attached it to the monitor, and connected all the peripherals, my first impression were, my goodness, it takes up less space. It's less physical mass on my desk, which is nice. Everything is just lovely on this computer. The keyboard's lovely. The screen's lovely. Although I have not had time to watch a movie on it yet. I did a quick little, what does James Bond look like on it? And it looks great. The screen is amazing. Let's see what else about the computer. Keyboard is lovely. I do like the black background. It looks kind of neat. Again, it takes a little less visual space, makes it look a little slimmer. The notch doesn't really bother me. I'm grateful for that extra little bit of vertical space with the menu pushed up into what would have been lost space. So the notch, the cutout in that doesn't really bother me. The video camera, the webcam that's included is, while it's better than the 16, is still nothing to get all excited about. So it works better, but it's still not good, so in my opinion. So here's a typical battery life situation for me. With the 16-inch, when I'm at school and I do some office time online for Zoom, it's about an hour. And with just a laptop running unplugged from power, after an hour, it's down to about 50% battery life on the 16-inch i9. It's 2+ years old, so factor that into this equation. Same situation with the 14-inch MacBook Pro Max. It's about 75% power after an hour of Zoom, so more time left to do other things. Plus, even basic tasks on the 14-inch don't seem to tax the processor as much, spin up the fans as much. So, for example, I can do presentations for the 2 hours or so that I'm in class, plus that Zoom time, and have battery time left over, where I could not do that with the 16-inch i9. So lots of extra battery life. I haven't seen how long I can watch a movie yet, but I don't think I'm going to need to take a power brick for the 2.5-hour classes I currently have. Again, the ports, MagSafe is back. I'm probably not going to use that very much except when we're on the road. I already have a configuration where I have power being delivered from one of the USB-C hubs. So I probably won't plug that in and just leave the power adapter in the travel bag. But it's nice to have the SD card slot back and an HDMI. So probably don't need to take an adapter or use it most of the time, even though I'll still have one, because occasionally you still need to use USB-A ports. So yeah. One of the big differences between my old 16-inch and the new 14-inch obviously is size. So what's the size difference? How do they look different? Let's take a look. So here they are side by side. On the left is the 16-inch i9. On the right is the 14-inch MacBook Pro Max. I think Apple missed an opportunity in calling this the MacBook Pro. That's what I'm calling mine on my computer desktop. Anyway, you'll notice the Apple logo is a little bigger. That's kind of cool. The shape is, as others have noted, is more squared, more boxy, little more beefy looking. So as you lay them on top of each other, the 14-inch is quite a bit smaller. But because the bezels on the screen are also smaller, it's not as much screen reduction as you might think, especially with the addition of the extra space at the top with the notch. Thickness, the 14-inch is a little thicker, which helps with cooling. I'm glad to sacrifice a little depth, not much. Here's the depth difference. The 14 inches on the right, the 16 inches on the left. So yes, it's thicker, but what is that? Maybe less than a quarter inch. So while there is indeed a size difference between the 14-inch and the 16-inch, as far as thickness and kind of bulk, overall bulk of the package, I'm glad for that as from a practical standpoint. Again, for cooling, that's going to help. For future proof of when the processor is going to have to run harder because the software is pushing it harder, there's more things being demanded of it, that extra little bit of space or quite a bit of extra volume actually, I imagine will help this computer run cooler, which helps it'll run faster, extend the life of the processor, and hopefully this isn't a computer I'm upgrading in 2 years as I did with the 16. One of the things I hope for with this computer is some future proofing. That one of the things I noticed in every Intel computer I bought from Apple is they worked great for about the first 6 months. I mean, everything was just snappy. It felt great. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so fast. I'll never need anything faster. And then after about 6 months, it seemed, it would always feel like, okay, now it's a little, okay, you get the spinning beach ball of death, you get the slowdowns, everything just seems to take a little bit longer, creates that friction, which just gets in the way a little bit. It's not a deal breaker, but it's an annoyance. So my hope with this new architecture of the M1 chip and the way the memory is structured and the graphics, all that stuff will just last longer as far as feeling fresh and fast for a few years. Speaking of fast, let's talk a little bit about, again, some of my real world use cases for this computer and what I noticed as far as the speed difference. Now, if you're familiar with computer upgrades, usually when you get to the next generation or the new chip comes out, there's a speed increase. Tasks are done more quickly, and it's usually on the order of like 10% to 20%. And so that's kind of, I'd seen some of the videos and was thinking, oh, this is going to be faster. But in the stuff I do day to day, it blew me away how much faster it was. So here's some specific results. So let's start with some photo stuff. So one task that I encounter quite frequently in my photography is just working in Lightroom. And in the 16-inch i9, as soon as Lightroom opens and you enter the develop module to do any editing, the processors would pretty much go to about 50% or higher, and the fans would kick on just without even doing anything. So it's a pretty processor intensive app just from the get-go. And then once you complete your tasks of doing the edits, the export process would take a while. And again, that would spin up the processors to 100%. The fans would get a little louder. So here's a task I did to see how much a difference there would be. So I took some photos from a wedding, and there were 432 of them, and I created an export on both the 16-inch i9 Intel and the 14-inch MacBook Pro. So in both cases, the computers are connected to the RAID where the photos are stored, and then they're exporting to the local drive on the computer, the SSD. So on the 16-inch i9, exporting those 432 photos took 20 minutes and 59 seconds. Almost 21 minutes. The CPU was at 100%. The fans were on. They stayed on for about 5 minutes after the process was done, even though the processor was running at about 50%. That same task, so 432 photos, which creates a 2.42 gigabyte file folder, took 8 minutes, 26 seconds on the 14-inch M1 Pro Max. So less than half the time, 8 minutes 26 on the 14 versus 20 minutes 59, almost 21 minutes. So while the 14-inch M1 Pro Max was processing those 432 images, the CPUs and GPU was being used at 100%. And the fans kicked in after about 2 minutes. The processor was showing, the temperature was showing 200 degrees. So it was kicking in the fans to cool that off. And after the process was done, the export process, about 30 seconds to a minute after it was completed, the temperature had cooled way back down to about 150, and the fans turned off pretty quickly as well. Another Lightroom task I wanted to see that takes a little bit of time is creating a photo book. So I had a book that was 70 pages with 176 images, 13 by 11 photo book. And that process took 10 minutes, 10 seconds on the 16-inch i9 Intel Mac, and it took 4 minutes, 33 seconds on the 14-inch M1 MacBook Pro Max. What order those go in? I don't know. I'm just going to call it the MacBook Pro still. Okay, so again, less than half the amount of time. Pretty impressive. A 100% speed gain is almost unheard of from one generation to the next. So while it's not a huge individual chunk of time, doing multiple versions of those tasks over a course of a week will save so much time. Next, share some results of timed video tasks. First, exporting from Premiere Pro on the 16-inch. It took 3 minutes and 57 seconds to export the video, which was an 8-minute, 18-second long clip at 1080p that had overlays, had some color grading, some audio edits, and all that good stuff. And on the 14-inch M1 Pro Max, it took 1 minute 47 seconds. So again, less than half the time. That's a pretty impressive speed increase. Interesting, on the 14-inch M1 Pro Max, the CPU and GPU was only at about 50%. The fans never kicked on. So Adobe seems like they got a little bit of work, at least in Premiere, to optimize for the chip. There's a little more bandwidth there in the chip that they're not utilizing. So get on that, Adobe. The last step in my video process, I run that exported Premiere clip through Handbrake to do an encode and do a little more file shrinkage. And that took, on that same 8-minute, 18-second clip on the 16-inch i9, it took 5 minutes, 38 seconds, so 5.5 minutes. On the M1 Pro Max 14, I'll get the name right eventually. It took only 2 minutes to do that. And during that process in Handbrake, the CPU and GPU were at 100%. The fan kicked on about halfway through the process because it was just generating so much heat while it was running the chip at max potential. So that's where you get that speed gain, is when you really ramp up the CPU and GPU. Again, when the process was done, after about 30 seconds, fan shut down, didn't hear from them again. So the only 2 times in my experience I've heard these fans turn on is under extreme load of 2 programs. Lightroom when it's doing a large export, and Handbrake when it's doing an encode of a video because it can maximize its processor use. Again, right now I'm using Ecamm Live to record this, and normally on the 16-inch i9 the fans will be running. Right now it's not running, and my temperature gauge is telling me I'm at 139 degrees only, so it's not putting much strain on this CPU and GPU, so that's pretty impressive. So in summary of this first impression of the 14-inch M1 Pro Max, I'm really impressed with it. It's quite a leap of both computing power. I like what Apple's done in returning the case and the usability of it to be less about form and more about function. I'm glad for that. It's an amazing generational jump that while the investment is pretty steep, the trade-in program was pretty good, and I covered about half the price with my trade-in on the 16-inch, which I will be sending off next week. If you have thoughts, experience, questions you want to ask about my experience with using this computer, I'd be glad to answer that. Just leave them in the comments below. If you like this video, I'd really appreciate it if you click that thumbs up button. That also helps you because it trains YouTube about videos that you find interesting. Last but not least, I'm required by YouTube law to ask you to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. I'll be returning next week to my POV photo walks videos. If you want to see what some of those are all about, I'll leave a link up here to a playlist. So as a person who does teaching, photography, and video, this new lineup of MacBook Pros is pretty impressive, really versatile, and I hope and think it's got a bit of future proofing built in with the way the chip is designed and what we can look forward to in the future. So I hope you have a great week. If you're out creating photos, I hope you have a fun time doing that, and I will see you again in the next video. Bye for now.